Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm gonna tell you how I got my first job in the US. I'm gonna talk about why it was hard for me to get hired even though I had a green card, which gave me the right to legally work here. I'll also discuss what I did in order to start working when no one wanted to hire me. This is kind of a long story, but people who've heard it find it pretty compelling. So if you're interested, get yourself a snack, make yourself comfortable, and let's get into it. Let me start from the time when my husband and I first moved to the US. I was in my mid-20s, and at the time I didn't speak English yet. We came to the US because of my husband's job, and while he was on his work visa, I didn't have a work permit. I was on an H-4 visa, which gave me the right to be legally in the US, but I couldn't work. At the time, this was okay with me because, as I said, my English was extremely limited, so I went to an ESL school. By the way, I have another video about how I learned English. I'll put the link in the description box below so you can check it out later if you're interested. So I spent about 2 or 3 years going to ESL classes. I really liked it because along with learning English, I found incredible friends there and we became really close. But after those 2-3 years, I got my green card. By that time, I had already started feeling more comfortable with English, so I started looking for a job. At the time, I didn't have a college degree yet, so I was just looking for an entry-level position. I was considering sales associate roles at large retail stores like Target, JCPenney, or Macy's. I started applying and I was really optimistic because now I could legally work in the US and I thought it wouldn't be too hard to find a job. Well, I was wrong. After I submitted several applications in different places, I either wouldn't hear back from them or managers would call me to ask me where I'd worked before. When I told them that I hadn't worked in the US and my previous work experience was back in Bulgaria, I wouldn't hear from them again. I remember one person even told me that they would prefer someone who had some work history in the US. But how could I have work history if I hadn't had the permission to work and I didn't want to work illegally? So now I was in a catch-22 situation. I couldn't find a job because I didn't have work history in the US, and I couldn't make work history as no one would hire me because I didn't have work history. To be honest, I was getting a little upset. But one day I saw an ad in the newspaper, and yes, it was a while ago when most people were still finding information in the newspapers. This was an ad for a job fair in a local Marriott hotel. It was a Marriott at the Depot, downtown Minneapolis. It was a historical building that used to be a train station and converted into a beautiful hotel. I'd driven by this place many times and I remember that I really liked it. So when I saw the info about the job fair, I was hopeful and nervous at the same time. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that I really wanted to work at the front desk of this hotel. I was excited by the opportunity to work and communicate with native speakers. I believed it would help me polish my English and make new friends. On the day of the job fair, I showed up and saw more than 100 people there who were applying for different positions. We gathered in front of the Human Resources Department, and I don't really remember how we could all fit in, but I remember that we were called one by one, and each person had only a minute or so to talk to one of the HR representatives. Mind you, at this point, I was applying for whatever they had open. Of course, I wanted to work at the front desk, but I could work at the housekeeping as well. I just wanted to finally get my first job in the US. When my time came, I walked in. I was a little nervous, but the woman was very nice. She asked me if I had worked in a hotel before. And guys, at that moment, I had to make the quickest decision I've ever made. I had to decide if I should be honest and tell her that I'd never worked in a hotel before, or considering how hard it was to find my first job in the US and seeing that being honest with the other places I'd applied to didn't bring me anything, I decided to lie. I don't know how I pulled it off because I'm not a good liar at all. But at that point, I was so tired of being rejected. So I went, yes, I have. I come from a very touristic place in Bulgaria. We have many hotels there, and I worked in a hotel for a very long time. I love working in a hotel. Working in a hotel is my passion. Well, it was true that I come from Varna, which is one of the largest cities in Bulgaria with plenty of tourists and many hotels. The only thing was that I never worked in one. But I didn't have anything to lose, so I lied. My heart was pounding because I thought I'd be busted right then and there, but I somehow survived. At the end, they told me that they would call the candidates who will be offered a job and send letters to all the others who were not chosen. I thought, great, if they don't call me, at least I will get a letter so that I won't have my hopes up anymore. Because you know that feeling when you haven't heard back from the recruiter and you still hope for a positive outcome? I didn't want to be in that state of waiting forever, so I was happy that they would let me know whether I got the job or not. So I was waiting and waiting and waiting. I was nervous and excited at the same time, but after about 2 weeks, I didn't have any news. There was neither a phone call nor a letter. I gotta tell you, had I received the letter, I would have been disappointed, but at least I would know not to wait and hope anymore. But because I didn't get anything, I couldn't stop thinking about this hotel. I tried, but this job was everything I could think about. I had butterflies in my stomach when I imagined myself working at the front desk of this place. After a few more days had passed without any news, I decided to go to the hotel and ask them for an update. I was so nervous. When I walked into the lobby, I saw a young woman at the front desk. At the time, I assumed she was just a front desk associate, and I asked her if she knew anything about the open positions. At first, she asked me, "Oh, do you want an application?" But I said, "No, I've already applied." And I told her that I was at the job fair and had been waiting for either a call or a letter, but nothing came. I think she saw how excited I was, then she looked at me again and she grabbed a piece of paper and a pen. Then she opened the door and said, "Come with me." Oh my gosh, you guys. At that moment, I realized that she wasn't just a front desk associate. She was a manager. Had I known that when I walked in, I think I would have been way more stressed. But ignorance is bliss, as they say. I followed her to the bar area where we sat. It was during the day, so the area was empty and we could talk freely. She started asking me questions. And again, I heard, "Have you worked in a hotel before?" And again, I responded, "I have, back in Bulgaria. I love working at hotels, blah, blah, blah." Of course, I was shaking, but at that point, I thought I didn't have a choice. No one wanted to hire me without any history in the US. So the least I could do when someone like her was willing to talk to me was to pretend I had experience in the field. At the end, she told me that she'd call me in a few days. I was so happy and I started waiting again. I was constantly checking my cell phone and the answering machine on my home phone. Back in the days, it was popular for people to have a stationary phone, so I gave her both my numbers. But I waited and waited, and again, crickets. She wasn't calling. I was so disappointed. But at that point, I told myself that apparently it wasn't gonna happen. It just wasn't meant to be, and I had to forget about this hotel and move on. I forced myself to stop daydreaming about me at the front desk. But a few days later, I remember I was out and about, and when I went back home, I saw the light on the phone blinking. Honestly, I didn't think anything of it. I just saw there was a voicemail and pressed the button to play it. It was her, the manager from the hotel. My heart stopped beating when I heard her voice. "Hey Daniela, this is Carolyn from the depot. Can you come this Sunday? I'd like you to start training at the desk." What? I couldn't believe it. I had to do some drug tests before my first day at work, which is a common requirement in the US. She told me where to go to do these tests, and I quickly went and did them. Then Sunday came, and as ecstatic as I was extremely nervous. I was afraid that I wouldn't perform to their standards. Up until that point, I'd only spoken English in my ESL classes, and this was the first time I would communicate with native speakers other than my earlier minor interactions in the grocery store. And although I felt that during the last 3 years I'd learned a lot, there were still so many words and phrases that I didn't know or understand. When I showed up at work that first day, one of the supervisors gave me a tour around. She showed me the different kinds of rooms, the water park, the break room where they had lunch, etc. While we were walking, she was asking me questions. She said, "So, I heard you worked in a hotel before in your country." I nodded. Then she asked, "Was it a large hotel or a small hotel?" Let me tell you, I didn't expect this question. I didn't know what would be considered a large or a small hotel. I got nervous. I wanted to play it down because I didn't have any experience working at a hotel. So I said, "Oh, it was a small hotel." "How many rooms did it have?" she asked. Oh my gosh, you guys, now my heart was pounding. I said, "A little over 100 rooms," thinking that this was a small number. She said, "Oh, this is not a small hotel." Now I literally felt all my blood going to my brain. I couldn't think anymore. I was so scared and thought that I'd be busted right then and there and fired for lying before I had a chance to start working. But I managed to say, "I'm from a large touristic city in Bulgaria, and a hotel with 100 rooms wasn't considered large." Then she said okay and changed the topic. I honestly don't know how I was able to pull this off. Guys, once I started working, it was really hard in the first weeks, even months. I wish I could say that my fear of not knowing or forgetting words was unfounded, but the truth is that I was constantly stressed out, and when you're stressed out, you can't think straight. I had to learn a lot of new vocabulary in a very short time. Sometimes I even pretended that I knew a word and had to guess its meaning from the context. Mind you, this was before the smartphone era. Even the computers at the front desk weren't connected to the internet, so I couldn't just look up the words that I didn't know. What I did was I memorized unfamiliar words exactly the way I'd heard them and looked them up when I went back home. This was challenging because English is not a phonetic language, and sometimes I had trouble spelling what I thought I'd heard. But this is a topic for another video. I'm also planning to make a video about how I felt and how I was treated on that job as one of the only few non-native speakers at the front desk. We had more people from other countries, but they worked in different departments like engineering and housekeeping. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in this topic. If you've made it so far, thanks for watching. I love sharing some personal stories about my life in the US. I think these stories can be helpful to people who are new to the US or planning to come here. If you like this video, please click on the like button, leave me a comment below, and subscribe if you haven't done it yet. I'll see you in the next video.
Ciao!